Thanks very much indeed for the introduction there. I'm going to talk, given my 10 minutes, I'm going to talk... How does this move forward, actually?
That's on the next panel.
That's on the next panel. Ah. Right. Well, maybe if somebody could change it back to my slide, that would be...
There we go.
Maybe, right. So now I want to go one forward. That's it. Right, I'm there. In my remaining 9 minutes, I imagine, I want to...
We're counting.
I just want to cover, 3 points. A banking union is a little bit EU, but I know you're going to have a lot more on that. But there are some points I want to make. Then go global and talk about accounting standards and derivatives. So banking union, first of all, and in the EU. I think we need to be very careful about the sequencing here. I think banking union comes from having achieved a political union, and that we should really think about the mechanics of getting the political union first, which is what's coming up next week with the HVR report. But people talk very glibly and loosely about deposit guarantees and this sort of thing about banking union. Many people even talk about 15 trillion of bank deposits, which should be guaranteed in some way. Now that is 1.5 times the GDP of the euro area. And what those people betray is their lack of understanding. The deposit guarantees, as proposed at the moment, as operated in the national systems, only cover the first 100,000 euros of a deposit. So it's nowhere near 15 trillion, which is going to be, or the idea was, would be guaranteed. But nonetheless, if you're getting towards any sort of number like that, as soon as you start saying that this is going to be mutualized, then you're talking about a volume of guarantees falling on the national balance sheet of, is it Italy? Or is it Spain? Or is it France? It is, of course, everyone thinks on the German balance sheet. And the numbers become so colossal that it's obvious that Germany, even if they wished to give such guarantees, the markets, as soon as they were issued, would realize they're incapable of being honoured. So the guarantee by Germany alone of some sort of mutualization of bank debt, bank deposits, or government deposits, or government debt, is just impractical. It wouldn't gain anything. It would actually reveal the hollowness of the whole system. So, as soon as you talk about that and realize that before there's going to be any mutualization of bank deposits or guarantees of, you've got to have had that political union first, which takes you into accountability and economic governance so that the euro area can control what risks are being taken on. And to my mind, that means that the only banks which could finish up with a European banking license are those which have already had their assets examined externally, as they are in, or have been in Ireland and Spain now and so on. External examination, and it's only the good assets which would ever be taken into the accountability of European supervisors. The existing stock of bad assets, in my mind, there's no moral case at all for taking them off the balance sheet of those whose supervisors failed to monitor them in the first place. So, banking union, I think, comes after. If an effective, serious banking union comes after a political union has happened. If it does happen, it is very growth enhancing. I have no doubt about that. It can be. And this is particularly for countries like Spain and Italy, which are merely a quarter of the GDP of the euro area. At the moment, their SMEs, reliant on bank funding, face a very high real interest rate, one which German companies don't face. And so there is a monetary policy which is not single across the EU. And there won't be until the funding costs of Italy and Italian banks all come down to within a reasonable level of those of Germany. And I'm not going to define reasonable in my few minutes available. So, growth-enhancing elements from a banking union come from confidence building. And it would come back very strongly as this crisis gets resolved. Let's go on and go global here, go to accounting standards. They were meant to be one of the highlights of the G20 process. You remember that many years ago? We're going to have a single set of high-quality accounting standards. And that's right. that objective is a good one. Because the essence of the capitalist system, when you buy an equity, when you buy a bond, what you're buying is the right to a series of cash flows. And you want to know, with some certainty, what are those cash flows going to be? If you don't know, you won't buy them, or you'll charge a very high price for them. So the accounting standards, in the end, are at the core of the capitalist system. And therefore we do need a single set of high-quality accounting standards. We have IFRS, get my tongue around that, IFRS in Europe, made by Europe in practice, built into a global system. 100 countries now use IFRS. More than half the world 500 companies use IFRS. But there is one standout. One large country isn't using them. Now, who might that be? Here in Europe, we'd probably say it's Germany, because we like to attack the Germans. It isn't the Germans, of course, it's the Americans. And why won't they accept IFRS? We don't have a professor of accounting here, but we need someone like that. The SEC staff, after all these years of operating with the IFRS, the IASB, sorry, all the efforts made by Europe in particular to bend over backwards to accommodate US concerns, finally the SEC staff has put a paper to the commissioners saying, if you want to do it, here's how you would do it. Is there a timeline? No, there isn't. So this is the real problem, that no timeline on this convergence. Frankly, if the Americans do not want to do it, then they shouldn't be part of the governance board of the IASB. I've heard Commissioner Barnier say that, and I think that there will have to come a time when the Americans leave the IASB if they don't want to apply the standards. That would be a very profound global political statement, but it may have to come to that. However, ACCA did a very interesting survey of American investors and found that they actually understand quite a bit about IFRS and are quite happy about it. And for those few, is it more than 3? I don't know, but for those few people who responded to the survey saying, if you have a sound understanding, would you like to use them? It's 2 to 1 yes. So American investors, for whom accounting standards are to protect, seem quite happy and would be quite happy to have IFRS. So that's the global move underway but not yet complete. Now I want to spend a few moments on IPSAs, SAS, International Public Sector Accounting Standards. The public sector has very large financial obligations, and their accounting standards are laughable compared to the private sector. And this is hypocrisy on a grand scale. Hans Hoekevorst of the IASB said, and I remember this very clearly because it's one of those things you jot down, that if the average private sector person, the average finance director, did their accounting on the same way as the public sector, they would be sent to jail because it's so misleading. I saw the statistic, the German gold reserves, 133 billion of them, they were last physically checked by the auditor 10 years ago. No, this 10 years. This is just incredible. If a large public company had checked its major assets every 10 years, there would be absolute uproar. So the public sector has got to get real on this. And why is it important? Because in the end, the public sector's assets, or the public sector's liabilities, their debts are called zero risk weighted. And David no doubt will have something to say about the risk weightings. He did, that's why I applauded him. It wasn't to hurry him up, it was because I agreed entirely. This zero risk weighting is ridiculous. When the accounting standards being applied, they don't include things like future pension obligations. Of course, the private sector does, but the public don't. And if you did that in Europe, you suddenly get some, forget about 90% of GDP public debt ratios, it's 190 or 290%. So these, in a single currency, these become extremely important, extremely relevant items for the investors in government bonds as to what exactly they're buying. Because 10 years ahead, there are going to be payments which are clearly there, but not accounted for, which are going to be a very serious matter. How these apply across the world, and I have no idea about the US government accounting standards. I believe they're somewhat better than in Europe at the moment, but these are things which we need to look at. Now, derivatives. We've heard a little bit about that. This is the interconnected problem. And again, one of the big deliverables of G20 was to be in 3 weeks' time, I think it is, that there would be, it seems going to slip a little, that in 3 weeks' time there would be collateral, all conceivable contracts, OTC contracts, would be cleared through central counterparties, first of all on exchange preferably, and then cleared through a central counterparty. Now the first thing you discover when you talk about derivatives is that nobody talks about small billions anymore. Everything is measured in trillions. So 500 trillion of OTC contracts, 10 times world GDP. This just gives you that scale of what's going on.